What's up, fam? It's your boy, and you already know what time it is, baby. Since October 29th, I have been telling my Discord fam, I've been telling the YouTube family, anyone who will listen, that I believe that the S&P 500 could eclipse 5,000 by January 21st, 2022. As a matter of fact, starting October 29th of this year, I started buying up all the SPY calls that I could even afford without going broke. And as a matter of fact, those SPY calls was moving so well that we was up over 100% over the time. And hindsight is 2020. I probably should have took book profit then in lieu of understanding that the market was set up to actually have a pullback around the 20th of November, like scheduled clockwork around the time. I've talked about all these things. But what I want to talk about in today's video, now that we had this nice bullish rally, is understanding where is the SPY actually going to next? Is it back on the trajectory that I expect for it? What's my price targets looking for as we head into the end of December? And can we actually use historical analysis to understand how the market usually tends to move during this month, as we call it the Santa Claus rally? I'm going to break all that down for you today in this video. But what I want to first start with is the indices, right, for the futures. Let's look at them, okay? We actually see that the S&P, the Dow Jones, and the NASDAQ is having a beautiful futures day starting off already, okay? Now, the one thing that I like to talk about when it comes to futures is that this is not solid ground, right? This is not what a line is drawing in the sand and you can write it to a check and cash it in the bank. This is actually giving you insight to what you can expect from how the market should open tomorrow, but that does not mean that the market will continue its trend like it is in the futures today. Now, one of the things that you can actually use is actually looking at the Asian markets is that you'll actually see that they are actually all green as well today, and they're quite bullish with 1%, 0.75%, 0.27%, okay? You are seeing movement in these markets that is exponentially letting you know how the markets may open, and it can be quite favorable for the markets unless we get some type of news to pull them back. As a matter of fact, not going to even get into the major details of it right now, but the House has just broken news that they have agreed to a bill to solidify the debt ceiling that can actually pass the Senate and actually be a vote on Thursday. More details to come on that, okay? But let's talk about this in the sense of what we're here for today. We're here to talk about the SPY. So what I want to first do is break down historical analysis of what we've seen in this break from November to December and how this has played out over time in the last 5 years over what has happened with the SPY. So what we're going to do, we're going to jump on over to stock charts, okay? On stock charts, we're going to use the seasonality actual charting to actually see how this has played out over time. We're going to start in 2016, okay? So in 2016, you will see that the S&P actually finished up over 14% on the, or near 14%, okay, excuse me. But let's look at what happened in November to December timeframe. Here, you'll see at the beginning of November, it was up about 6.5%, 7%, and then made a run to the end of the year about over 13%. That's a 6.5% move on the S&P, okay? Now, let's look at what happened in 2017. If we just lay that over the top of 2016, you'll see that we had a move, again, about 16%, and then you see a move to the upside at the end of December that's eclipsed over 20%. So you can call, let's just call this a 5% move, okay? Now, in 2018 was the year where we had a catastrophic pullback at the end of the year that no one actually predicted, and we saw prices fall in 2018. So we saw it fall off a cliff at the beginning of 2018, where we actually pretty much winded back up flat at the beginning of November and closed down about 6% negative at the end of the year, okay? So that was a downtrend in SPY that we have not really seen since we had recession times earlier in the century, okay? So when you go to 2019 though, we go back, we see how prices moved throughout the year, and we had a nice move here up to November. Well, we actually opened the month up in November about 22.5% up on the indices, okay? And actually eclipsed 30% at the end of the year. So to me, this is another 7.5%, 8% move that you can say actually happened here, right? And in 2020, okay, the last year that we just actually had before this year, you'll see even with the pandemic actually on our necks, we had almost a break even point here where we was about 2% up over the whole year as the SPY recovered from the pandemic down here back in March. Around this time, when we was down negative 30%, we recovered all that pace back, okay, and actually was up going into November about 2%. Okay, and you see that we rallied over 13% at the end of December. Now, the one question that I have here is, do we really believe that price action like this can happen again in the year of 2021? I mean, we're having supply chain shortages. We're actually dealing with a semiconductor shortage that's really affecting a lot of the markets. Retail was impacted by the Omicron variant talk that we had earlier in the week, last week. And even travel was affected just smudgely by this type of information. Well, even like I said before in previous videos, Moderna, Pfizer, all these companies are coming out and saying that right now their vaccination will have low efficacy against this Omicron variant. As a matter of fact, a study came out today talking about how people have already tested, scientists have tested the Omicron variant variant against actually the actual vaccinations of Pfizer and seen that it comes in with low efficacy and kind of really does not provide any protection against the pandemic new variant strain. Now, how do we understand this and how do we interpret this? Is this something that the market will actually react to if we actually got worse news than this? And like I've talked about previously before, we have yet to have a death in concern of the Omicron variant. So maybe this is why the market is now starting to see, okay, the numbers are not trending to hospitalization and the numbers are not trending to deaths. So is this really something to be worried about? And can a booster really alleviate this problem at the end of the day? And maybe, just maybe, Pfizer or Moderna is accurate in saying that they're about 90 days away from actually making a new booster that the FDA can emergency approve for emergency use, and we can actually be null and void on this spike that we're dealing with in this variant. Honestly, don't know. More to come on that. But let's talk about this from a standpoint of actually looking at trend analysis by looking at the technicals, okay? Now, I've been charting over on SPY for a while now, okay? I've been looking at it, been talking about it on live streams. If you haven't been joining me on live streams, definitely join me on live streams when I do my closing bell with Craig, because I talk about the SPY each and every day, okay? One of the things that I talk about when we look at SPY is that we was on this run. We had this nice run that was always has a drop off on the 20th of each month or around that range where like a sell-off period happens, but then we quite recover and then we get back to momentum. Now, as you have seen lately, what I've talked about is that you will see that we had that momentum drop and now we actually dropped to the original macro trend line that actually goes back, that I have dated back to actually of the pandemic time frame. And then I have the micro trend as well that shows that we actually had a major breakout of the channel, and then you see that it actually fell back down to our original macro line, okay? So now, where do I actually believe that we're actually at right now? Well, if you've been following me, like I said, you actually know I have some of these trends already drawn out, and all I'm doing right now is updating you on them. What you will see that we actually had was that we saw a trend up to the top of the channel, and then we saw a trend to the downside of the channel. When this actually was hit the top of the channel, we saw it started to decline down. I drew this trend line in anticipation of could this actually be a wedge. But what we saw here was a gap up from the trend, so we actually followed this trend line out. And I have been saying, if we get back to the above this pink line here, we are in a bullish state of actually seeing that the momentum can actually pick up on SPY. Now, the way that I charted this, though, was that I had this dotted line here showing the angle of trajectory that I expected SPY to take to actually recover to that line. Well, today, I actually pushed this well above the close of where I expected SPY to actually trend to today. If you was to ask me where I thought SPY would have ended up somewhere in today, I would have thought in this range here. But unfortunately, it actually changed and went into to the positive note, changed to an upward trajectory that now has me quite a little bit worried, okay? I still think that SPY has room to run, but what I want to see is actually SPY not actually get too ahead of itself. I want to see it actually cool off. Test this new area here, right? Test this area of resistance here at 473, pull back from it again, and then consolidate a bit around 472, 471, and then make its run through 473. And here's the reason why. The reason why is because if SPY gets too ahead of itself, the further it gaps away from our new micro trend line here, this pink one, the harder it can fall back to it, come crashing back down to either our support or to the macro overall trend that we've seen. And we want this thing to continue to bounce here and aggressively push to the top of the channel again to give us that run that we really want to see, where we can eclipse 500 easily by the end of December, okay? This is where it's at for me. This is what I believe. Now, what kind of sentiment can you actually use to kind of gauge this? A lot of people will tell you that they don't follow the VIX for using us for the SPY, right? And I agree with them. I don't think it's a one-for-one trade-off of the SPY, right? But I do think that the VIX kind of gives you that gauge to understand if volatility is coming down, that means that the markets are willing to let the market run. That Wall Street is not worried about anything of emergency use or anything of that sort that they need to be scared of and hold the market back. What we've seen is that since we had this big spike since early February or June or September, that we've seen that the VIX was at 35.31, and now it's coming back down to 21.90, right outside that gap up that we seen previously before. So if we was to actually track the gap here, we'll see that we actually right about a little bit before entering the gap. And if we actually come down here and cool off on the VIX, we can actually see SPY get a nice lift, maybe a 6 to 7 point move on the SPY. Remember, we just moved up nicely on the SPY today. As a matter of fact, we moved up on the SPY today 9 points. We could possibly see another 6 to 7 points if the VIX continues to pull back and the markets continue to run. Now, how am I playing this? I am still in the moment of mode where I tell you 480, 485 in that range. I start to pull a bit of my options off the table. I want to start securing a bag of profits. But then, as this thing continues to pick up momentum, pick up speed, enter towards this 490 range, okay? This 490 range is going to put us about in this area here. To me, this is going to be, if we stay on this upward trajectory that we're moving now, we're going to get there faster and sooner than I expected, and we're going to see a move to the actual 490 range probably by Christmas Eve, okay? Or I'm sorry, New Year's Eve. And we started seeing 490 around New Year's Eve. I will pull a little bit more off the table at that point in time. And with that move, what I will continue to do is actually every $10 or so, pull more off. And if this thing actually runs over 500, I'm starting to actually secure the bag a lot until I start to see a retracement back down to whatever trend that we're trending at that point in time too, and actually secure more profits. Now, fam, we are a long ways away from this being the end game, but we're setting up for a move in the right direction to actually seeing a lot of people be very successful in this move in the markets. As a matter of fact, let's check the open interest and then we're going to close this out. But let's check out the open interest on SPY right now and actually see what we're looking at when it comes to the $500 calls for January at this point in time, okay? So this is going to be quite interesting to me to actually check this out with you, and I have not looked at these in quite a while. Okay, so let's have a look at those options, okay? You'll see, if we head on over here to Webull, you'll see that the $500 option plays for January now have open interest of 12,000 contracts available at this point in time, okay? These contracts, oh, that's on the put side. I'm sorry. Let's go to the call side. The call side has 67,000 open contracts at this point in time on this play right here. And they're now still averagely cheap. You can get in on the bid at about $67, or you can go on the ask side at about $69 as well. That's a $2 difference. Really and truly, this is a great spread at this point in time, and we are seeing great movement in this position as it has now picked up steam. So to me, this is something to consider overall. If you're not in a position, maybe this is something that you want to take a position in now, or maybe it's just something that you want to sit on the sideline and evaluate and see how it goes. Now, I appreciate you for being here with me, understanding the play that we're in, and I hope that you have good trades coming up. It's been your boy Craig. I want y'all to stay safe. Peace.